I am Rabbi Rubi Goldstein, and the story I am about to tell you will shake the very foundations of what you believe about the afterlife and the Messiah. For 51 years, I dedicated my life entirely to the Torah, serving my congregation in Brooklyn with steadfast devotion. But then, one fateful winter night changed everything. That was the night I died. For exactly 14 minutes and 16 seconds. Before I share what happened beyond death, you need to understand who I was. Born into a distinguished Orthodox Jewish family in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, my future was mapped out from the very beginning. My father, Rabbi Solomon Goldstein, was a revered Talmudic scholar who had fled Europe just before the Holocaust. My mother, Sarah, descended from an unbroken lineage of rabbis dating back to 18th century Lithuania. From as early as I can remember, the weight of this heritage rested upon me like a tallit, heavy with tradition. Excelling in my studies from a young age, I demonstrated an extraordinary grasp of biblical Hebrew and Aramaic. By 13, I had committed entire sections of the Torah to memory, earning the moniker, the living scroll from my teachers. At my bar mitzvah, I delivered a speech on Isaiah's messianic prophecies that drew scholars from across New York. By 18, I was being prepared for leadership. Yeshiva consumed me. Endless nights spent debating halakha, poring over ancient commentaries until dawn. It was then I met Rabbi Menachem Kavod, my greatest mentor. Unlike other instructors who stressed rigid adherence to the law, he urged us to seek its deeper meaning. The Torah is not merely a set of rules, he would say. It is a living dialogue with the divine. His teachings shaped my view of leadership, though I would one day understand his words in ways he never expected. At 25, I married Rebecca, the daughter of a respected rabbi. Our union was seen as ideal, and together we built a strong Jewish home. We were blessed with 3 children, David, training for the rabbinate, Sarah, pursuing Jewish studies, and Benjamin, whose passion for Torah mirrored my own. At 32, I became head rabbi of Congregation Beth Shalom, one of the youngest in Brooklyn. Under my leadership, it grew from 300 families to over 1,000. My reputation rested on my meticulous approach to Jewish law and my ability to bridge ancient wisdom with modern challenges. My Shabbat sermons drew visitors from across the city, and my writings appeared in esteemed journals. Yet beneath my outward success, questions stirred. Isaiah 53 troubled me. Traditional explanations of the suffering servant felt increasingly inadequate, but I buried my doubts beneath scholarship. One moment still haunts me. 5 years ago, a young congregant fresh from Columbia University came with questions about messianic prophecies. He had studied them deeply and reached unsettling conclusions. Rather than engage him honestly, I deflected his concerns with rehearsed arguments and handed him apologetic literature. The disappointment in his eyes lingered for weeks. I told myself I had done my duty, but something within me had shifted. My life followed a structured rhythm: prayers, study, counseling, teaching, writing, community events. I was respected, secure, unwavering in my beliefs. Challenges arose, but I had answers. I was living the life I had been trained for. That's what made January 12, 2024 so extraordinary. It wasn't just that I died, though that alone was remarkable. It was that everything I had built my life upon was about to be tested in ways I had never imagined. The day began like any other: morning prayers, Talmud class, a counseling session. That night, during dinner, Rebecca spilled water on the toaster, a trivial mishap. When she suggested replacing it, I insisted on fixing it. "It's just water," I reassured her. "Once it dries, it'll be fine." Looking back, I see how God uses the ordinary to accomplish the extraordinary. That small accident, would become the doorway to a revelation that would upend everything I had ever believed. But at 11:47 p.m., I was simply a tired rabbi fixing a toaster. The kitchen was silent, the hum of the refrigerator, an occasional car passing outside. The house carried that rare stillness, a hush in a city that never truly sleeps. Rebecca had gone to bed, urging me not to stay up too late. Benjamin was at a friend's house preparing for a debate. The only sound was the ticking clock, counting down to an encounter that would change everything. I had unplugged the toaster hours earlier, letting it dry. Now I wanted to be sure no moisture remained. A routine check, something I had done countless times. It should not have led to what happened next. But God often moves through the unexpected. As I tilted the toaster, shining a flashlight inside, I spotted tiny droplets on the heating elements. Without thinking, I reached for a cloth, forgetting, in my exhaustion, that water might have seeped into the electrical components. The moment my hand touched the metal, a violent jolt of electricity surged through me. The shock flung me backward, my head striking the sharp edge of the granite countertop. In an instant, everything vanished. Not like sleep, but absolute void. As if existence itself had been swallowed whole, my kitchen, my home, my very being, gone in a heartbeat. For decades I had spoken of death, counseled grieving families, presided over funerals. Yet nothing in my years of study had prepared me for what came next. There was no gradual transition. One moment, I stood in my kitchen. The next, I was somewhere else. The air, if it could even be called that, was thick, pressing against me with an oppressive weight, stretching each moment into eternity. The darkness was alive, pulsing with something sinister, feeding on fear and despair. And in all my years of Torah and Talmud study, I had never encountered words to describe this place. In yeshiva, we had debated the afterlife, Sheol, Gan Eden, resurrection. But all our intellectual discussions were powerless against this reality. This was no peaceful rest. This was immediate. This was terrifying. As my awareness sharpened, I heard sounds no human should endure. Not screams of pain, but weeping, the anguish of realization. Not theatrical wails, but the shattered cries of souls who had understood too late what they had rejected. Each sob carried the weight of choices made, paths taken, now sealed forever. But what haunted me most were their voices, Hebrew, Yiddish, English. Yet all spoke the same message: irreversible loss. I heard prayers woven into the cries, fragments of the Shema, echoes of sacred texts. But they were not offered in devotion. They were lamented, the desperate wailing of those who finally saw what they had refused to see in life. I moved through the darkness, walking, floating, or carried, I couldn't tell. The void shifted, stretching into massive caverns carved from living shadow. The walls breathed. And then I saw them. Faces, countless faces, twisted in anguish, emerged from the walls. Their hollow eyes bore witness to a truth I was not ready to face. Then my world shattered. Among them, I saw men I had once revered, rabbis, scholars, teachers of Torah. They had devoted their lives to God's law. How could they be here? Then I saw him, Rabbi Menachem Kavod, my mentor. His once joyful eyes now carried the unbearable weight of eternal understanding. Ezra. His voice echoed with sorrow deeper than any rebuke. We were wrong. We knew the prophecies, we saw the signs, but in our pride, we refused to see. His authority remained, but now it was a warning. Then, another voice. Rabbi Shlomo Emmet stepped forward, his face twisted with the torment of truth realized too late. We made the law our idol, he mourned, and in doing so we missed the Messiah we claimed to await. More faces emerged, mentors, colleagues, men I had admired. Rabbi Yitzchak Stern, who had spent his life refuting messianic claims. Rabbi David Levine, who had fought to shield young Jews from missionary influence. All now stood as witnesses to the truth they had once denied. Now they stood as witnesses to the devastating cost of misplaced zeal. The air grew heavy as truth bore down. These souls were not condemned by an external force. Their torment came from within. They knew, too late. I wanted to turn away, but there was no escape from truth. Every argument I had made, every sermon reinforcing tradition, every time I steered a questioning soul back to inherited beliefs, it all stood before me, undeniable. The faces in the walls spoke in unison, a solemn chorus of warning and regret. They recited the prophets, not as doctrine, but as revelation understood too late. Isaiah's suffering servant, Zechariah's pierced one, Daniel's timeline. Scriptures I had studied my entire life now burned with new meaning. Just as the weight of truth threatened to consume me, something extraordinary happened. A single point of light pierced the darkness. At first, a distant star, then growing, cutting through the void with an intensity beyond anything I had ever known. This was living light, infused with truth and love. Its presence changed everything. The weight of despair lifted, replaced by something both awesome and comforting. The souls around me reacted, some recoiling, others reaching with desperate longing. The faces in the walls faded, their regret lingering but their presence retreating. The lamentations softened, replaced not by emptiness, but by a silence alive with possibility. The light grew, not just in brightness, but in presence, until it filled every corner of this place. Then, from within the light, a figure emerged. At first, I could not see his features. The radiance was overwhelming, too pure for my eyes to grasp. Yet before I saw him, I felt him. His presence was unlike anything I had ever encountered. I fell to my knees. This was no angel, no mere messenger. This was far greater. Every fiber of my being recognized an authority beyond all my study, beyond every theological argument I had ever constructed. As he stepped closer, I began to see more. His white garment seemed woven from light itself, and his face. I could barely look, yet when I did, I saw something extraordinary. Features that were unmistakably Jewish, yet somehow universal, both ancient and eternal. But it was his eyes that captured me. They held all the love of the universe, yet a wisdom so piercing it saw into the deepest corners of my soul. In his presence, my religious training, my arguments, my certainties about God, everything melted like mist before the morning sun. The radiant light that surrounded him now penetrated me, exposing every hidden thought, every unexamined belief, every trace of pride. The faces in the walls faded into insignificance. The voices of my teachers fell silent before the true teacher. Even the weight of regret that had crushed me moments ago vanished in his presence. As I knelt there, unable to move or speak, something profound began to stir deep within me. It was as if scales were falling from my eyes. For the first time I saw. Scriptures I had read, debated, and dissected my entire life now surged through my mind, not as theory, but as truth. Isaiah's words blazed before me. For unto us a child is born, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. How had I read this 1,000 times and not seen? Micah's prophecy echoed within me, But thou, Bethlehem, out of thee shall he come forth, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting. The pieces fell into place one after another with breathtaking clarity. Then Zechariah's words struck like a thunderclap. They shall look upon me whom they have pierced. The weight of revelation was overwhelming. Yet, in this moment of blinding clarity, I realized my entire life had been preparing me for this encounter. Every hour of study, every debate, every sermon, it had all led me here, to this place, to him. But unlike the souls trapped in darkness, I was given something they had not, a chance to return, a chance to tell. He lifted his hands, and what I saw shattered everything I had ever believed. These were not just scars. They were prophecy fulfilled, undeniable proof of a love so profound that it had willingly embraced death, not just for the world, for me. In that moment, suspended between life and death, darkness and light, the old and the new, I felt something breaking within me. The Rabbi Rubi Goldstein, who had lived by tradition and law, was being undone and remade. The light around me grew, and with it, urgency. I knew my time here was brief. I was being sent back, not as the man who'd arrived, but as a messenger, a witness. The darkness that had once engulfed me now felt distant, yet its warning was seared into my soul. As I knelt, bathed in that supernatural light, one truth became undeniable. Everything was about to change. My life, my purpose, my understanding of Scripture, my very existence. Nothing would ever be the same. The only question was, would I have the courage to embrace this truth when I returned? This was not the end. It was the turning point. What followed would be the most extraordinary conversation of my life, a dialogue that would redefine everything I thought I knew about God, the Messiah, and my purpose. But that belongs to the next part of my testimony. Ezra, my son. His voice resonated not just in my ears, but in the depths of my soul. This was the voice that had spoken creation into existence. The voice that had thundered from Sinai, the voice that had called to the prophets. And now, impossibly, it was speaking to me. I knelt, overwhelmed. The light around him was blinding, yet perfectly clear, revealing everything as it truly was. And in that moment, I understood. I understood Isaiah's cry, "Woe is me, for I am undone." Isaiah 6:5. "You have sought me all your life," he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. Reading the scriptures, teaching others, searching for truth. But you looked for me where I was not, and rejected me where I was. Each word struck like a thunderbolt. Memories rushed through my mind, sermons I had preached against him, students I had led away, the arguments I had woven to deny him. Yet, in his voice, there was no condemnation, only love, only an invitation to understand. "Lord," I whispered, my voice trembling, "Are you—" "I am." In those two words I heard the burning bush, the voice from Sinai, the presence that had led our people through the wilderness. "I am the one your people have waited for, the one your prophets spoke of, the one you have longed to see." As he spoke, the space around us shifted. We were no longer in darkness, but we were not in any earthly place. We stood where time and eternity met, where truth was alive, no longer just intellectual, but visible. "Show me," I pleaded, the scholar in me still burning. "Help me understand what I've missed." He smiled, full of patience and joy. "Come now, let us reason together." Isaiah 1:18. Suddenly, scripture came to life. Texts in Hebrew and Aramaic, words I had studied all my life, hovered before me, pulsing with meaning I had never seen. "Begin with Moses," he said, gesturing to the glowing words before us. What did he write about me? I watched in awe as key passages from the Torah pulsed with unmistakable intensity. Genesis 3:15, the seed of the woman who would crush the serpent's head. Genesis 22, the binding of Isaac, now revealed as a prophetic foreshadowing. Deuteronomy 18:15, Moses' prophecy of a prophet like himself. But, Lord, I stammered, my mind racing, we've always interpreted these passages differently. We built an entire framework around expectations of your own making, he finished. A tremor of recognition shook me. Ezra, when Daniel spoke of the Messiah being cut off after 69 weeks, what date did your calculations yield? A jolt of realization coursed through me. The Daniel 9 prophecy had always been problematic. Its timeline pointed to the Messiah's arrival and death in the 1st century CE. We had built countless explanations to work around it, but now, it pointed to your time, I whispered. To your death? Yes, he affirmed. And Isaiah 53, how did you explain the suffering servant? A lump formed in my throat. We had always argued it referred to Israel, not an individual. But as the passage hovered before me, its truth was undeniable. Wounded for our transgressions, bruised for our iniquities, I could no longer deny what was now so clear. We misinterpreted it, I admitted, my voice heavy. We couldn't accept a suffering Messiah. It didn't fit our expectations of glory and restoration. He nodded. Yet, David himself wrote of my suffering. Before me, Psalm 22 unfolded in radiant clarity. I read it with new eyes, pierced hands and feet, divided garments, the cry of abandonment. How had we missed something so obvious? Your people still wait for what has already come, he said, not with reproach, but deep compassion. They search the scriptures daily, yet fail to see that they testify of me. Something inside me broke, not physically, but spiritually. A dismantling. Every argument I had built against him, every defense I had clung to, crumbled before the weight of truth. But Lord, I protested, my mind racing to my congregation, my family. They won't listen. They'll say I've lost my mind, that this was just a hallucination. He smiled, and in that smile I saw both understanding and authority. Some will reject you, just as they rejected me, he said. But others will hear and believe. I'm not sending you alone. My spirit will go with you, and I will give you the words to speak. I hesitated. What about the law? I asked, my mind returning to the commandments that had shaped my life. What happens to the Torah? His reply was immediate. I did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, he said, quoting his own words. The Torah points to me. It was always meant to lead you here. The law is holy, but never an end in itself. Suddenly my understanding shifted. The entire system, the sacrifices, the festivals, the priesthood, took on a meaning I had never grasped before. The Passover lamb, the Day of Atonement, the Feast of Tabernacles, not mere rituals, but prophetic shadows of him. Your people celebrate these festivals, he continued, but they have forgotten their significance. They keep Passover, yet do not recognize the Lamb of God. They observe Yom Kippur, yet fail to see the atonement already made. They build Sukkot, yet do not understand that I came to dwell among them. Every word illuminated another piece of the puzzle. Centuries of tradition were not discarded, but fulfilled in ways I had never imagined. What would you have me do? I asked, knowing my life could never be the same. Tell them what you have seen and heard, he replied. Some will reject you, as they rejected me. Some will persecute you, but others are waiting, searching. For their sake, you must speak. As he spoke of persecution, visions unfolded before me. My congregation's rejection, the pain in my family's eyes, the accusations of betrayal from my colleagues. Strangely, these visions did not fill me with fear, as they once would have. His presence had given me a peace beyond earthly concerns. Remember, Ezra, he said, you are not alone. Many of your people have recognized me as their Messiah. Even now, thousands follow me while remaining true to their Jewish identity. I had never considered this. To me, faith in Jesus had always meant ceasing to be Jewish. But now, I saw the truth. Accepting him was the most Jewish decision one could ever make. "The time is short," he said, urgency in his voice. "My return is near. Your people must be prepared. They must know that their Messiah has come and is coming again." As he spoke, I felt a shift, a pulling. I was being drawn back to the physical world. The brilliant light around us began to fade, but before it vanished completely, he spoke once more. "Remember what you have seen and heard. Tell them that their Messiah has come and is coming again. Tell them that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob keeps his promises, and that the greatest promise of all has been fulfilled in me." And then, darkness. The next thing I knew, I was gasping for air on my kitchen floor. Rebecca knelt beside me, her face streaked with tears as paramedics worked frantically. I later learned I had been clinically dead for 14 minutes and 16 seconds before they revived me. The doctors called it a miracle. They were right. But they didn't understand the true miracle. I had died that night. Yes, but I had also been reborn. The Rabbi Rubi Goldstein, who had tried to fix a toaster, was gone. In his place stood a new man, a man with a new purpose. The weeks that followed were the most challenging and the most transformative of my life. As expected, my revelation was met with resistance. Many in my community questioned my sanity. My position as rabbi was in jeopardy. Friends I had studied and prayed with for decades cut me off. My older children struggled to understand. The father they had always known now spoke of a truth they had been taught to reject. Only Rebecca sensed that something profound had happened. Though she wrestled with its implications, she did not turn away. Yet, despite the rejection, despite the misunderstandings, I stood firm in the truth revealed to me. The scriptures I had studied my whole life were no longer just ancient texts. They were alive. The prophecies I had once struggled to explain now aligned with stunning clarity. The God I had served from a distance was now intimately present, in ways I had never imagined. And the greatest revelation of all, accepting Jesus as the Messiah didn't make me less Jewish. It made me more Jewish than I had ever been. For the first time, I saw our festivals, prayers, and traditions in their full prophetic significance. Everything we had practiced, everything pointed to him, and found its fulfillment in him. But I was not alone. Other Jewish believers reached out, sharing their journeys. I discovered a growing movement of Messianic Jews who had come to the same realization. Faith in Jesus wasn't a betrayal of our Jewish identity. It was its fulfillment. Now, as I share this testimony, I do so knowing the cost. Many will dismiss my words as delusion. Others will see them as betrayal. But I cannot deny what I have seen and heard. I cannot remain silent about the truth that has transformed my life. To my Jewish brothers and sisters, I understand your skepticism. I once shared it, but I urge you, examine the scriptures again, this time with open eyes and an open heart. The Messiah we have waited for has already come, and he is coming again. The darkness I witnessed showed me the eternal cost of rejecting this truth. But even greater than the darkness was his light, his love, his truth. The same Messiah who revealed himself to me is calling out to you. The question is, will you listen? This is not just a near-death experience. It is a warning, a wake-up call, an invitation. The same love that reached out to me is reaching out to you. The same truth that set me free waits to set you free. The Messiah you seek is already in the pages of our own scriptures, if only you are willing to see. The choice now stands before you, as it once did for me. Between darkness and light. Choose wisely, because as I learned that night, eternity hangs in the balance.